page. So we got to this. Does this look right to everybody who's here on Saturday? I'm not saying Saturday.
Yeah, no one was here Saturday.
This look right? Did we get to this?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, actually the first gold coins were right here in a place called Lydia, but it's swept into Sumerian. That's what we're going to talk about. Lydia is right there in what is now Turkey. And so let's get into Samaria. And there's so much that happened. I pick and choose a few things, a few stories. And you got to talk about the big man. So this is all stuff we did Friday, correct? Did we get the gold? And it was right. We get the soldiers, copper and iron. So this is all we got through, the cooperation. And don't forget that whole thing about debt. Everything is just moving and transferring and doing with debt. So all this was Friday. We tried barley, but it ate. There's copper and iron. Pay soldiers. Gold became key. Well, when did the United States get off the gold standard? Anyone know? Yes. The United States went off it the beginning in 1933 and then completely in 1970. And so let's go and get to then. Oh, we got taxes. Oh, did we mention taxes? Yes. Yeah, that's how they make gold valuable. Governments then will collect taxes in gold, and therefore everyone had to do all their exchange in gold. That is why dollars are valuable. The governments collect money in dollars, and therefore in the United States, everybody does their transaction in dollars because they have to pay taxes. If you do your transaction in anything else, which is really difficult to do, then you have to exchange that to dollar, and anytime you exchange, you lose. So why would you ever do anything from dollars? That's how governments make currency. And so like in 2001, Italy did that with the euro.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And we had some, Louise is from Germany, we did that with the marks in 2001, which actually 2001 was last year. And so let's get to Mesopotamia, which is Greek for in between the rivers. And I will explain this place later on, but this is in the Pergamon Museum in Berlin. And it's the most amazing thing. That was stolen from the people of what is now Iraq, but we're moving on. In this museum, this incredible called the Ishtar Wall. We take a field trip to Berlin? Have you been to Berlin?
No.
See? Get a yellow school bus, take off east. Or should we go west and really enjoy the bus ride? So, why is my mouse working? There we go. So, this, remember we saw this in the video, this is the Fertile Crescent. And not that it rains that much, but they have all the crops, they have the animals. And here, between the Tigris and Euphrates River, and so much would be copied from this. And then ironically, because of various reasons, they would fall behind. But this would still be a mighty empire well into the 16th and 17th century. It's part of the Ottoman Empire well into the 18th century. And then it began to collapse, and competitively they fell behind. And so between the Tigris and Euphrates River, and part of the reason they had to adapt is even though there are plants, there was a shortage of water. It does not rain that much. Some areas we would consider to be a complete desert. Most of it's semi-arid. Now, don't forget, we live in Helen. It doesn't really rain here either. So, and we don't get that much snow either. We're in a very dry place. If not for the mountains, it'd be pretty dry. So there'd be a flood every spring, not like the Nile. We'll get to the Nile River in Egypt. Before they built a big dam in southern Egypt, the Nile would flood every time on the same date, but still they know floods coming in the spring. And so if you could control that flood by making small dams, they could not make a dam on the mighty Tigris and Euphrates River, those are far too big. But on tributaries or make channels, let water come into the channel to make a dam, make a reservoir, they could make irrigation ditches. By necessity, they had to work together. Remember, one of the things about civilization were these complex institutions that had to come together in this Fertile Crescent. The Sumerians it's along the Tigris and Euphrates were the first city states, and they were in this kind of swampy, reedy area. They probably went there a combination of fearful of enemies. There was food there. One of the biggies growing everywhere were onions, and they could eat onions. So they would be mocked as onion eaters. Onion's not a great thing to eat. Yeah, by themselves. Besides the obvious breath issues, perhaps. No, my guess is probably everybody had bad breath in 4000 BC. I think you just get used to it. But what don't onions provide? There's no food. So they had to have other things, but there was wheat, there was animals along the river, but it was dry. They hid there and realized using the mud, they can make walled cities. So irrigation, and once they started irrigating along the river and building cities, the first irrigation would just take advantage of it. And then kind of like make a little dam where the flood was, and eventually that came to something else. We in trouble. You got a locker?
I don't use it.
And some of the cities, they have local governments, eventually closer to monarchies. Would be one of the, this is a model of it. And using the mud along the river, they made earthen walls. They'd be relatively easy to break down, but still, this would be, imagine coming across this after miles of nothing and swamp. Wow, they must be advanced. And Nippur would be another one. The destruction of Nippur would lead to one of the great sagas of this time. The curse of Naram Sin. And in the middle, the Ziggurat or temple, and I'll explain that in a second. And this would be the center of religion, government, and be a marketplace. And this is going to be common towns. So we get to Egyptian towns. So the market and the temple, the center of all activity. They would start eventually having almost like trained armies. And also this would be the last place to hold out if enemy attack. You notice how here's the temple, which is kind of a pyramid here, and you know it's in a walled area. So that's the last place they can hold out. What you call a stronghold or a stockade. And as they became food surpluses, they began to accumulate more. Other people might want it. Build a wall and the farms would be outside. But that means they had to have those granaries. And I really like this one because it clearly shows how they made themselves a lagoon. And here, not only for water irrigation, but also as a protected port for their trade when they began using ships. They started using boats around 4000 BC, a protected area for anchorage, where they anchor their boats. And this is the first one we get bread. And the bread would be unleavened. We wouldn't add yeast, but there's yeast in air. We breathe in yeast all the time. Tastes good, yeast. And so just having they would probably just mixing water and flour, but eventually adding other stuff. But leaving it out there, we get yeast in it. And they learned real fast that the bread would rise a little bit and get more out of it by using the yeast in the air. So it depends when you cook it. They would know, leave the bread out, yeast from the air, rise a little bit, or cook it right away and get the unleavened flat. The thing about the unleavened flat bread, it doesn't rot as fast. And it is kind of amazing, you know, just how brilliant it had to be, but also you just had to be really observant. Had to be paying attention all the time. And if you were paying attention, it gave you a competitive advantage. It's easy for us not to pay attention to such things because we can just go out and get a loaf of bread. If we just don't pay attention. And then onions, same deal, found them dug up. Onions. So the ziggurat would be the center, this temple. And they would make mud blocks, dried out, stacked. But they're learning to use a kiln. We talked about metallurgy and pottery. Some of these are still there. This is one that's partially the old ziggurat, partially they've been rebuilt a number of different times. Unfortunately, when the United States invaded Iraq in 2003, a number of these were destroyed. by a combination of negligence on the part of the United States and just looting after it. We didn't protect it. We knew it, we just didn't protect it. We as a nation. And this would be the centers of religion. At first, the priests would be elected, but later on, it would become more of a hereditary thing. This would be a granary, but this would also be a classic example of public works. The government would organize construction, whatever the government of the village might be. There's all kinds of different governments. Could be a few strong men or one strong man or a family. They would organize it, they would pay for it, the people would come together and build it. So it was commissioned by the government and built by the government, public works. There's all kinds of public works right now. If you have ever been in a car, roads are public works. Heard of those? You're sitting in an example of public works. The lights are on because of public works. The people of the United States decided to build dams. And most of the power in Helena comes from hydroelectric dams. So that is the government. Without the government, we would be in the dark. It would be chaos and we'd be roaming the streets and living in cardboard boxes. We'd raid others. If we raid Helena High for food, who's with me? I think we could take it. There's only like 400 kids at Helena High. We'd take them. All right, we're not going to attack Helena High. They're watching. When the camera goes off, we'll organize, right?
We have the numbers of things.
So at here's the remnants of the ziggurat at And so that is a picture from above, and that's what it must have looked like, and it is massive. I would like to go there. It's unfortunate that, no. I'm gonna go there. For a long time. Very sad, but I like to see stuff like that. But they're big. It's called the Mountain of the Gods. And I love that. It's like we built our mountain to shake hands with the gods. They have many different gods in Sumerian. Polytheistic. And so I just wanted to show you that picture of that ziggurat. Here's another one at Urkik. This is in southern Uruk, I'm sorry, in southern Iraq. And it almost, when they first came across this, if you look at it, imagine it with just more sand and dirt on it and a few scrub brush growing on it. It looked like a weird mountain. And then they went through and started digging out, like, oh, this is constructed. They could see it. Now, just because of the nature of the way time works, when the Mayan civilization started building their pyramids in the Yucatan down here, it's gonna be a little bit later, but they started building. It's just amazing how humans kind of keep on doing the same things. And if you go to the Yucatan, which is really flat, jungles are and swampy areas are flat by definition, there'll be these weird humps. And a lot of them are these temples. And they dig up the jungle and everything, and there's this massive pyramid down there. Because I was in this place called Koba, right here, and I was in a little town here called Tulum. Went to a place called Koba, and about 10% had been dug out. And I'll show you pictures when we get closer to that. But the same kind of thing happened here. There's this one that's huge. It's about 120 feet high. It's one of the tallest in Mexico. Pyramids, and they've uncovered it, but there's all these humps all over that are just that look like mountains. And like this, now they know it's something underneath. They just haven't been able to totally excavate it. That might be an easier bus route. And what's the plan? You guys take the bus, go down. I'll meet you down there. Sound like a plan?
Who's driving?
Huh? Don't bog me down with details. I planned the trip. You do the hard part. So the gods, they're polytheistic. That means what? Yeah, more than one god. And there's some generic Sumerian gods. We know because we can read a lot of the writing. Here are priests. That's a priest. It was very common for the priests, and it became the style. Once they had bronze swords, they begin to shave it really tight and shave their head. Clean shaven heads with a sign of being closer to God. It's interesting, and sometimes you have the opposite happening. It just depends on the faith, I guess. And Utu was the sun god, Nana the moon god. I think we obviously know who's the most important. We need the sun. Utu. And one god that will be mentioned a number of times is Ishtar. And the reason I mentioned Ishtar here is Ishtar, the god of love, and don't think in terms of, yes, it is also involved romantic love, and also involves there for procreation. But another big thing is just us together. And so think in terms of us cooperating, working together. But Ishtar will be copied by a religion that we'll talk about probably beginning next week for the test, Zoroastrians, but also Egyptian god will be Ishtar. The Romans will adopt that. Ishtar is going to survive in the Babylonian gods. It's kind of amazing how that happens. And then Tammuz. And this is the vague underworld. And the underworld is both good and evil. And that's one of the things about these gods. They're not necessarily like there's good and bad in their conflict, which you'll see when we get to in a couple of weeks with the Greek gods, fighting and battling, and then the Roman gods will do that too. But these are the gods, and you will see them both kind of, they'll be drawn mystical, but also abstract. So their visions of them will be different. Like, for example, the big eyes. That was very common when they drew Utu. Very big eyes. This is when the Akkadians came. Here's a priest. And you'll see that abstract is more like the vision of that's what makes it more mysterious. The art wouldn't be exact, even though clearly they're very talented. So I just wanted to show you a couple examples of that art. But let's get to the technology that they developed. It's pretty remarkable how much the Sumerians invented. We can see so much from here, and these go hand in hand. And this is actually a toy plow. That's 4,000 years old. Pretty cool. And one thing I liked about this one is that's a picture 4,000 years old. That's from about 20 years ago. But same, similar plowing techniques. Here, what is this great development? Wheel. You need something to pull it. That's why they had wheels there. They had animals to pull it. Donkeys are probably coming, horses too, but most certainly they're pulling them with cattle. You can't pull things with pigs. Pigs don't like that. Has anyone been around pigs? They're very smart and they're very angry. I think they have good reason to be angry, but they're angry. They can domesticate pigs as long as you feed them and don't bug them. That's basically pigs. Here's a couple more examples of technology. We start seeing sailboats, canoes, and eventually triremes with rows of oarsmen that could get pretty darn fast. 90 to 100 miles an hour. Okay, I made that. About 5 knots, which is about 7 miles an hour. Now that might not seem that fast, but if you walk at 3 miles an hour, 5 is pretty fast. On the water, that's just purely by rowing power. Wind can go a little bit faster. The problem with wind is if the wind's going the direction you don't want to go, it doesn't do you a lot of good. In fact, it hurts you. What are these great little inventions? Yeah, harp, musical instruments. You start seeing not only horn instruments, but eventually the precursor to lutes and eventually guitars will come from Sumerian. Here then we have walled city, ziggurats, canals. Technology was pretty amazing here. Hydraulic engineering. I'll show you this picture again. It's still one of my favorite pictures. This is irrigation, damming. So this is irrigating crops, and I assume swimming with the fishes. Which, if you know anything about organized crime, that's not something you want to do. Anybody know what that means? You drown. Yes. That's a mob way of saying they get rid of you. Also, the first real contracts. And the contracts would have to be written on a piece of contract would be written usually on a piece of dried mud. Sometimes they would heat it because it's a contract here. And they would say the deals of what our business arrangement or whatever it might be. And they would have this contract. And this is our agreement. Eventually, this would become binding as law. And if you ever heard somebody say breaking a contract, it comes from literally breaking that piece. You either now, the contract is done, we have paid our debt and we break it. Or I'm not going to pay it and I break it. Literally breaking a little piece of ceramic tile. And that's where the first contracts are. And obviously you can see they probably, like make little symbols of very crude symbols to something a little more organized. You see the beginnings of an alphabet. Speaking of that, the alphabet. At first it was hieroglyphics. Hieroglyphics, yeah, it's off. But that would be like pictographs made on pictures. But eventually we're coming to something else. And so you can see like here's a 3200 BC in Samaria. Instead of drawing a quick little picture of a head, and that meant head. Now, here's the thing. They drew and made their words like this. At first, they go from top to the bottom on the tile. Well, if they did this, it was easier to turn it and then turn it back. When they started writing differently and turned the head, that's how they turned it, and then they just kept it that way. They started just drawing it like this. And then that's hard to do. Just get a flat piece of paper and just make kind of a symbol of it. It's kind of like this. Eventually that. And that would be one of the first alphabets, one of the first written languages, right here. You can see pictures to here. So water, they turn it sideways to just two lines. And this is called cuneiform. Cuneiform, written language. So imagine a hunk of mud, they flatten it, punch it in there, then let it dry, and now it's saved. And that's how come we know so much about them. So much of this survived because it's relatively dry. Okay, mud tablets aren't good when they're wet. Because what do? They go back to their natural state. Mud! These, they save because it was dry. So we have a lot of these left. And with it then, hey, if you're going to start like recording contracts and deals and food and soldiers, you need math. And their math was base 6. So what is math that would develop also in the Mideast using the numbers are Indian from the subcontinent of India that we use today? What are we now? Base what? We're base 10. They're base 6. So imagine it's 6, and then it goes. It was so hard to do. Like 6, and then just 12, so on. So different columns they can go on. So when I was in college, I have a math degree too because I do. But we had to do, I took a history of math class. And that actually was pretty fun. There's a dog running around outside. Or we have dogs running around. There's a squirrel that runs back. Steve. But we had to do basics math in class. We had to figure this out. And everyone's head, you can see them like, this is stupid. It was so hard. So from now on, we will do only basics math. I know you, but that's how come when they did their calendar, they came up with the 60-second minute, 60-minute hour, base 6. They broke up the days into 4 groups of 6. Or sorry, 4 groups of 6. 24 hours. That's where that comes from, the Sumerians. So that's how come we have 60 minutes, 60-second minutes, so with that, and then look at that. There's a priest, and what does he have? Anybody know what this is? Good guess, not quite yet. A calendar. And so, the first calendar. And this is an incredibly accurate calendar. They went through and figured that out. They have 12 months, which makes sense in a base 6, doesn't it? And they had a lunar calendar. So they figured out 12 months, every month was the time it took for, as they saw it, the moon, well, after the moon went around the sun, or moon went around the earth. What's wrong? What's the problem with a lunar calendar? It misses a lot of days. So it's very accurate by days, but they eventually would come up and they would add days. They figured it out. The Romans never did. And so the Julian calendar we're on now at first was all messed up and we lost it. But we already mentioned the wheel, we mentioned the plow, pottery and bricks. I'm just trying to give you an idea how much came from there. Here are the mud bricks, but this is pottery. How would they make it hard? In a what? We already talked about this once before. And a kiln, heat it. And that's where metallurgy comes from. Speaking of that, the first textiles, what is he doing? What is he operating on? A loom, making fabric. Here's a big invention. It's hot there. An umbrella. So here's a big man king riding through the umbrella. I just thought that was a great picture. That's in the Pergamon Museum in Berlin too. But here's a biggie you have to get, the Bronze Age. And so by doing pottery and having the leftovers of metal inside the pottery they would have, they started eating copper. The problem with copper is relatively soft and tarnished, and brittle and breakable. But when they combined the two and heated them, they had a metal that could be made beautiful, ornamental. They could design products, but I think you see the biggie: weapons. And this revolutionized warfare, because all of a sudden now, if you had bronze weapons and your enemy was still using sticks and rocks, what an advantage you have, especially if you have a wheel. And so that's when you start getting these individual city-states, a combination of, we better build walls because more people have these, and hey, let's take from them. Let's steal. And so, last thing for today, it happened really fast. By 3000 BC, you start seeing organized forces of infantrymen, not just fighting individually, but fighting in groups. And this is from a stela, I'll show you later, but basically this big stone monument. And they have a picture of a phalanx. And a phalanx is infantrymen with shields, probably leather, hardened leather shields. Not enough maybe to stop a spear right through it, but any glancing blow will protect you a little bit. But then one hand, actually this one, holding the shield, and the other hand, a long spear. And these ones, Sumerian, probably 8 feet long. And if you have all these men holding spears, it's like a porcupine. And they come at you. If a group of 20 men with spears walk at you, what is your first instinct to do? Bring it on. We will make a phalanx, and we'll show you how it works in the hallways. We're eventually coming to the famous Macedonian phalanx of Alexander the Great, with 16-foot-long spears. Oh, why do they hold the spears up like this?
They can't go all the way.
For 2 reasons. Yeah, first off, if you stab the guy in front of you, bad for morale. But secondly, you hold that up, it deflects arrows coming. Make sense? Now, do you see the problem with this? Yeah, those are too heavy to hold shield. They have them with shields, but pretty soon you can't hold a shield. They're too heavy. Also, you're all facing this way. What if the enemy comes from that way? Another thing, you're walking to your nice group. River, creek, hill, tree. What happened? You gotta go around and they attack. These are great on nice flat ground. The Romans would beat it by spreading out with trained forces and just kind of encircling them. Which we'll show you that too in the hallway. Some of you won't make it, but it's all worth it for the class. All right, I went a little bit longer than I originally thought I was gonna, but that's okay. I like the Sumerian stuff. I'll pick a few people here and there. I'm not giving you much time, but I want everyone quick. If you have your phone, go on Teams really quick and make sure that I assign, make sure that chapter 2 works. I think I put it on there. I will get you one.
Okay.
I'll do it right as soon as class is over. It's chapter 2 on there. Everyone check Teams, make sure chapter 2 is on. And I know everyone has a textbook, but I know here you don't have it. If it isn't, I'll have to add it. Is it working? Is it on? I thought about it, then I realized. I'll put your name. I'm using that. I'm not using Teams for this. I'm getting no response. Is it working? This doesn't sound good. Oh no, chapter 1 is still on there. Everybody, I'm gonna add chapter 2. I actually put chapter 1 back on. I made a mistake. I had a cold last year. Then I don't know what. Give me. Loading. Hey, check now. You have to scroll down, look for it, just say chapter 2, a PDF you can load. We got it? All right, so I want you to read sections 1 and 2 on that. I originally put the quiz here, but that would be cruel, right? So do you want the quiz now? Let's do the quiz on sections 1 and 2 for chapter 2, and I'll go all the way Thursday. Because I'm not going to be here on Wednesday. Probably. So remind me, I'll give you the first 15 minutes of class to read tomorrow, and then I'll tell you the story about Gilgamesh and Crazy Men in the Woods and horses and chariots. Oh, and we have. And we just got done China, right? We're doing the. Yeah, okay. I'm putting your name on right now.